Jönköping. I'm Raven, and join me to kick off round number 2 is Frodan. How's it going, mate? I feel like it's been probably years since we've actually cast together.
Right? Yeah, I'm glad to be here. One of the best parts about watching a Master Tour is being able to see all of the players globally come together. But one thing that I also appreciate is when we get to work together cross region, being able to cast with Gia and Derek from APAC, and of course you and sometimes Otto, I guess. Sure.
Yeah, it's pretty cool overall, and we've already had a pretty explosive round 1. Honestly, we'll get you caught up on some of the matches and scores as we go through the day. But we saw in the first match on stream that Blaze just got off to a fantastic start once again, winning his first round, and we saw some other players do pretty well so far. But we are going to get into our first match, and it is Alan Numbers. I'm going to call him for the rest of the day, or even just Alan versus Pavel, because I'm definitely not reading all those numbers out. But two very, very well-known players, Dan, and bringing some pretty, I would say, safe lineups so far.
Yeah, Pavel, of course, with that win is really big for him. This is not just a weekend for people who could get into GM for the first time, but also for people who might be able to return. If Pavel makes a deep run, he has a chance of being a top 3 cash earner in the Master Tour and an opportunity to win back his spot for Grandmaster that's been relegated just a week earlier. So a lot on the line.
Yeah, and this is going to be even more difficult for anyone from the European region specifically, but just because of how high those earnings are from, say, Blazer and IROC as well. So Pavel and say that the likes of Hunter Ace as well, of course, has the much harder route to try and get a spot, as there are just really less spots available, but still there is a chance. And it would be quite the Masters Tour if so soon after Season 1 ends, we get a Grandmaster return. It would be pretty crazy overall. But Alan as well, although not a Grandmaster right at this moment in time, has had some pretty strong performances recently too.
Yeah, Allen has always been one of the most consistent players in the Americas for years, and he kind of treads that line between APAC and Americas for several
Mm.
years. In back when HTT first started, we had players who were part of a Chinese-speaking QQ group. QQ is back then very similar to how Skype was. It was like a communication messaging service that a lot of Chinese speakers would use. And so him, along with Silent Storm, Al Skyhigh, WTY Bill, like some of these players that we saw a lot got the championships, all came from the same practice group. And all of those players have, kind of moved on from Hearthstone. We still have a few of them competing, like WTY
Mm.
Bill in the Master Yongqing. But for Alan, he's been like the one that's been the most hardcore grinding since. And he's the one who's kind of like the last player standing from that group, so to speak. And it's funny because he represents like a pastime of the competitive Hearthstone.
Right. Yeah, and we see he's actually one of the players who's in heavy contention to actually get into Asia Pacific Grandmasters. As you said, he kind of goes between Americas and the Asia Pacific region. But also, let's take a look at the lineups and the bans as well, because, we've watched a ton and cast a ton of Grandmasters, and I feel this might never end. The discussion of do you ban Warrior or leave it up? I'm not sure where you lie on this one specifically, Dan, but to me, banning Warrior or leaving Warrior up just gives the opponent free win. There are, of course, reasons that can be said strategically, of course, but for me, it's too scary to do, and we see both players actually just sticking to that and getting those Warriors out of the way.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I've seen, a handful of not banning warrior strategies, leaving up a warrior in favor of, say, trying to ban demon hunter because
Right.
demon hunter is also a very difficult class to handle. And I think that, there's merit to that. I do think that it's a lot more of a riskier ban than other metagames because warrior doesn't seem like a deck that you can reliably target. So we've seen people bring all target warrior lineups and yet they still have like a slightly losing win rate against Warrior. So while it can work out, it feels like something that we are not going to be seeing very much.
Yeah, and looking at the, I guess, the other two decks that everyone talks about, not Demon Hunter, not Warrior, which are the two most popular, we've seen a ton of players go to Rogue. A good chunk, at least a lot of the European players specifically, have gone Rogue Warlock, whereas we're seeing a lot of Druid in there, but not too much Hunter as of yet. And even just from seeing some of the chats between the players, some of them that have brought Hunter already in round 1, seemingly regretting it, even though they may have got the win. A few different players now have seen have been saying Hunter actually lost a couple of games and they nearly got reverse swept. So it's a pretty dicey pick there from Pavel, at least from how I've been seeing it play out. But of course, it is only round one. We've got plenty of matches to see and plenty of a bigger sample size to test. But what are you thinking of the really in this matchup, the Druid versus the Hunter picks between these two players?
Yeah, it's really interesting because the data has, kind of
Okay, I think we might have lost
been
Dan
siding.
somewhere. Oh, no, he's back. Okay.
Oh, oh
I
my
don't know if
God!
there are
Is it
internet
part of that
issues.
spike? Can you hear me, right?
I can hear Dan. I'm not sure if the stream can or not because he's very jittery for me. And at least I appear to be moving smoothly. So it looks like it might just be a bit of an internet issue on Dan's end. But I'm sure we'll be able to get to the bottom of it, fix it. As we are going into or getting ready to go into our first match. See, now Dan's just trying to throw me off by making me laugh at what he's doing on his camera as I'm trying to do the professional thing of keep the show going. But these are those win rates we were talking about a little bit earlier in Grandmasters from the round robin as well. So this is for the, I guess, the post-patch newest up-to-date information with wins. And pretty much it's all still to play for, honestly, outside of that Pain Warrior.
Yeah, Pain Warrior, Raid Warrior, whatever you want to call it. I definitely brought 71% of the time. This still kind of surprised me, but again, there's a rise of Highlander Mage in the past couple of weeks. Because
that is the win rate, though, remember. Although it's the same graphic as Brings, that's win rates.
Yeah, oh, I apologize. I was reading it while thank you for clarifying.
No worries, no worries.
This shouldn't come as a surprise whatsoever, as Pain Warrior is very dominant right now in Grandmaster. We'll see if it ends up following suit. The brave few that let it be played, it has to be young.
Yeah, and this is the big thing as well. Although we can look at win rates, I spoke about this a little bit in at the start of round one. Although, yes, okay, well, Warlock's been, over 50% win rate along with that Rogue. Well, if that's the case, and then everyone's expecting a Warlock as a bring, then a deck like Hunter suddenly gets a little bit better. And this is where, like, the tournament meta kicks in and all the reads come into play, right? Of, well, if you expect everyone to go one way, you go the other and gain off that. But we saw in round one, Fury Hunter going for a very anti-aggro like focus on leaving that warrior up, trying to maybe take down a demon hunter lineup, and it didn't look like it got the job done consistently enough for me. So it's always risky. We see these players who do something outside the box and it either really, really pays off and they either win it or top four, or they just go out 0-3. So I'm pretty excited to see how some of those players do.
Yep, and the thing to kind of contrast that is round one win. We've actually had hundreds of games played per class for those that's been represented, and Warrior still comes out on top at number one at 55. So even in this big of a field where you expect more normalization of the data, because from 20, 30, 40 games, you might get spikes in win rate that goes into 70.
Right.
Obviously, Warrior is not 70% against the field. That's just absurd. But even in this field, and people who leave it up are targeting it, Warrior still comes out at 55% win rate, the number one class for round one. And second is Rogue, right behind them at 54%, and then Warlock at 52. Everything else kind of around that 50% or lower win rate. So 3 out of the 4 classes that a lot of people expect to bring this weekend are doing really well. So then a couple of X factors is exactly what you're talking about, the Druid or the Hunter. And I think we're going to find out, which one was the right bring over time. But for now, they look both relatively okay at, 40, 48% or so.
Yeah, and that's like the issue, or I guess the problem, you could phrase it that way, of the meta at the moment, because Warrior and Demon Hunter are so powerful, or perceived as so powerful. They take the 2 slots, and then it's what of the like middling other decks do you bring, and is there any edge in taking one over another? It's very, very interesting overall. But I do like the recent builds of Rogue with those questing adventurers in. I think that's why we're seeing Rogue specifically being brought a lot, and also why its performance, at least just in that round one, seems to be up there, because I do just think quest adventurers have made the deck that much better that it becomes maybe just that little bit mini tier above all the middle tier decks at the moment.
Yeah, Rogue has been one of the more interesting arcs in Ashes of Outland. I think, most people, of course, were swept away by the Demon Hunter hype. And then, when Warriors started rising up, people crowned that. And then Priest got a little bit of time in the sun where people were worried it was going to be a top class in the metagame.
Right.
And then very secretly, Rogue has been kind of like putting together just the right deck list, refining itself. and withstanding all the patches, because nerfs also came to the Rogue class. So you expected Rogue to take a back seat. But funny enough, even though Shadow Jewel Hanar got nerfed, Rogue seemed to get stronger in the metagame because of the relative balance of power when everything else got nerfed. So, I really think Rogue's in a good spot. I stand corrected because around week 4 or 5, I was starting to question in Grandmaster whether Rogue was even a good bring anymore. And then I started seeing his performance, started jamming a lot of games and understanding that the potential of this class is still really high. And I would probably say that Rogue is one of the most skillful decks to play correctly in the metagame right now because of how many one-mana options you regularly get every.
Right, and both these players are bringing that Quest Adventure list, but I am liking that, and the addition of some players just bringing Spy Mistress, and not as a secret package card, but just as a card in the deck, because it's just another solid one-drop that can help fight back versus aggro, and also is still just useful later on, either having lackeys to help it out, push more damage, give them taunt, and so on. There's even been discussion, I know Subtle's enjoying this potential of playing sidekicks in Rogue then, to really just start just jamming in just the powerful cards. Probably get Shadow Weavers in there too, and Rogue will just end up Galakron plus neutral cards in a short while. I imagine it's pretty crazy how the deck, like you said, has taken a while, but has just continued to just secretly improve over time, as opposed to just saying, "Oh, here's the deck list, done, next."
Yeah, and I think that's good because I think one of the issues that we had with just deck lists in general is I think people were a little bit too tied to the past. We were playing things like the Devoted Maniac in Rogue lists,
Right.
Almost as an auto include, because if you're going to play Galakron, you got to invoke him. And I think Rogue started realizing that they can divorce, these parties more and more. Like, you don't have to have a fully invoked Galakron to have a very impactful Galakron turn as Rogue, especially when you're starting to put regular Shadow Steps in your deck and you're even able to collect more value off Kronk's High Spear and Togwaggle.
Right.
And I think that a really common problem that we started seeing Rogue in the early days of the expansion was that when they would lose with 10 cards in their hand, or around that number. It was always a full hand. So Rogue's like, okay, maybe we don't have to generate so many resources and draw so many cards and just hope for this giant swing turn. We don't even have to rely on burst damage anymore. We can just kind of answer the board, take out Faceless Corruptor, and play a leaner deck. So that way our early game, which is the biggest problem with Rogue historically, can be smoothed out a lot.
Yeah, and I really like it. I think Rogue's just always been one of those classes that's always interesting to watch good players pilot, because, like you said, the tools are all there. It's just how you tie it together. But without further ado, finally, we are ready to get into our first match of round 2. That is not Swiss round number 1. That is a lie. It's Swiss round number 2. But Alan Numbers on the top on the Demon Hunter, and a face you will well recognize as Pavel, ex-GM now, I guess, also on the Demon Hunter. So the early game's about to kick off right now.
Yeah, you'd love to see it. I actually really like this cadence of having a Master Tour right after Grandmaster season ends. One, because I think a lot of people have been focused on GM, and some people who want a redemption arc for some of these GMs they can play immediately. But also just to kind of have that clash of GMs.
Right.
This match has a lot riding on it for multiple reasons. But of course, I think a lot of people who are fans of Pavel throughout the years would really love to see him come back. Alan almost virtually guaranteed a spot. Of course, he just has to kind of protect his lead, so to speak. And he's going to be doing it through some text in the mirror. He has Blowtorch Saboteur, a card that started making its way in a lot of deck lists for Demon Hunters to try and disable that initial hero power for a long time. And it really actually ends up becoming pretty impactful in certain.
Yeah, it's the combination of the fact that its effect just lasts until the hero power is pressed, so it forces the mana usage. But also, a 3-mana 3/4 is just a reasonable card in itself. It's not like you have to spend 3 mana on like a 2/2 for the effect, right? Because then suddenly you lose so much tempo, it's not actually worth it. We are going to see even coined out here from Alan on the top. And again, this is it, right? It just doesn't really die to most of the stuff Pavel's going to have access to. And now suddenly with his turn, yes, he's got that Twin Slice off the top, but he would have to use Twin Slice, Second Slice, and a 3-mana hero power his whole turn just to kill off the Blowtorch, and he would lose his sidekick.
Yeah, and I think that, you kind of mentioned something that is really important in this matchup too, which is just straight up raw tempo, like the ability to grab control of the board. And if Pavel wants to get rid of it, he has to commit his hero power and both his Twin Slices. And that's painful because Twin Slice with some of the cards in his hand are some of the best synergy that they have, with Worklays of Azzinoth also ready on turn 5. But at the same time, Pavel will lose the board commandingly if this 3-4 gets a little bit out of control. So it's like Pavel's going to instead rely upon his comeback potential through cards like Altruist and Warglaze.
That's it, and that's where the Demon Hunter Mirror gets a little bit strange, because it is heavily focused on literally the first 1 to 2 turns of the game. Hence why like Twin Slice is, I think, the highest win rate card in your mulligan in the mirror. But very swiftly, it does start to hit into those power plays of those 5, around the 5 mana cost plays. The Warglaze, the Metamorphosis, the Glaive Bounds, and the players will end up like taking turns generally of who has that board control. And a lot of the time, it does come down to just who can't respond first. Often is the player who loses.
That's right. So Pavel now picks up yet even a more expensive card. It seems like he is a couple of Glaive-bound Adepts away from completing the set. And that is, an achievement for a 0-1 start in the series.
Yeah.
What do you do in this scenario? It's so bad.
Especially because of the sidekick, he couldn't even just say, okay, this is horrible, but I'll Altruist, Twin Slice, Second Slice clear. Because he would have been 1 damage off on the Blowtorch to even kill it. So it's just such a horrible spot. Pavel just has to hero power pass effectively. And now he's probably at least glad he has the Glaive Bound so he can do something to this board.
Yeah. You're right. It's just that it's definitely a costly endeavor because it'll cost him a lot of health. That being said, he does get the board cleared, which is really nice. He does even have the option of using his Twin Slice, but I think he might be doing it as well.
Yeah, I think he realizes that he is by no means safe doing this. As you mentioned, of course, you pay for it with the damage you take trading, but also he doesn't have strong minion development of his own right now, so he'll be playing the removal game for the near future at least. And I think holding on to the Twin Slice with the Altruist, maybe next turn he can go Metamorphosis hero power, and then the turn after he has Altruist, and then some flexibility in what he can do after that.
Yeah, it's a really good point, which is how does Pavel's next few turns look as well? And if we're thinking about him taking a defensive stance, Metamorphosis might need to come out, simply because if Alan ends up developing a Glaive-bound Adept or anything else, he's going to need to be able to react to that too. So it's more than just how do I deal with the Blowtorch Saboteur.
Right.
It's more about how do I budget my resources so that way, if I have to, clear off multiple minions next turn, am I going to be okay?
Wow,
he is committing to the Second Slice as well, and I think that this is entirely reasonable because Pavel recognizes that even if he does think about Metamorphosis, there's a chance that he might need to play the second Warglaze instead.
That's true, actually, yeah. This turn is very much going to depend on how Alan proceeds now, because one of the problems Pavel's got, I think in a perfect world, he would like to just play that Skull next turn. But the problem is, outside of what exactly Twin Slice, it's going to be locked out, right, from having its effect. So he's got a long way to go before that Skull's live, whether that's due to just having enough mana or just being able to clear the cards out. But for now, it is probably looking like it's going to be either the Meta or Glaive-bound, not Glaive-bound, the Warglaves next turn. Alan, so far, can do almost what he wants here. Even has the Second Slice to activate a Glaive-bound as and when he needs, regardless of whether he has the weapon equipped.
Yeah, and I think I like this from Alan, with just setting up damage. He's pretty much just counting down to 0 here for Alan, because he doesn't have to set up the Glaive-bound Adept right now. Instead, he could just guarantee that 4 damage, and in the meantime, push 3 every turn at the very least with Glaive-bound Adept. So Pavel finally gets some presence onto the board, but he's
the old one
drop.
Yeah, this is where it starts getting really close and where health really starts to matter. Both players are playing double I-Beam, so they're not cutting what I deem to be the uncuttable cards like some other players do. So there is ways for Pavel and Alan to recover some health going forward as well, with the help of a potential Vulpera Scoundrel as well. But it's still not looking good because Alan is going to have all of the initiative here, and he does get an I-Beam from the Vulpera. Not going to use it quite yet, but still, that is a huge deal. It means he can take the damage with this weapon, continue to push on board, and he does have a bit of a backup plan to help him push out of some of the more niche lethals that Pavel could try and set up.
That's right. So Pavel now is staring down just guaranteed lethal next turn. He's going to go ahead and skull just to see if he can get that eye beam. But when you hit the hard cast, the skull will go down with no additional benefit.
It's just going to be it, yeah.
Terrible spot. And you can't do that. You can't be floating 7 mana on turns 3 and 4. You definitely can't be fishing with Gul'dan without the Owlcast effect. Recipe for disaster. So Alan pretty much just kind of stumbles into a game 1 victory, not necessarily by any achievement, but it looked like Pavel's deck failed to execute.
Yeah, it's one of those games that Demon Hunter can get there a lot of the time, even if it has a bad opening, so it has those later cost to turn 5 or 5 mana cost cards. Not really against another Demon Hunter, though. It can do it in other matchups, but if your opponent's a Demon Hunter too and they get the start, it becomes very, very difficult, mainly because you just take too much damage in that early game trying to fend off the aggro, right? We saw the weapon equip from Pavel, but there's so many trades into those Battle Fiends meant that he was just at such a health disadvantage. It was a bit of a problem, and that does leave Alan with Rogue and Druid to take wins with so far, with Pavel still not only having his Demon Hunter, but his Rogue and his Hunter as well.
Yeah, and you gotta also feel good if you're Alan in the sense that even just having that slight tech card with the Blowtorch Saboteur, having that 3/4 come into play, even necessarily not for its battle cry, but just to have an extra 3-drop to improve your ability to curve out, has to feel good. These kinds of the small techs, if they end up being really valuable, make you feel like your preparation has paid off. And in the early stages of the Swiss, I would say that confidence is not the biggest factor, but is definitely a factor. And getting that momentum under your belt, where Alan was able to get a very fast win in round 1, and then now starting off 1-0 for Pavel, has to be a lot of momentum going his way. Because I know that a lot of players, when they start losing a lot early, their confidence starts going, and they're like, "Oh, I have to win 8 series in a row in order to make top 8." It starts to affect them a little.
Yeah, of course, and Alan got to the semi-finals in Masters Tour Arlington, right? So he's also got a certain level of momentum coming off that, and now, as you said, getting off to a great start against Pavel in this match number 2, and then Swiss round 2 is huge. Does look like he's going to go for his Druid. Pavel going to be on the Demon Hunter again, and Alan's Druid is a bit of a strange one, as it's dropping in bits of tech we've seen from some other lists. He's running the 1 Claw, but he is also only running 1 Power of the Wild and 1 Rising Winds, but double Wrath and still the double Moonfire, double Crystal Power. So there's a couple of nods, again, to some more anti-aggro tools, but he's not going as deep into it as, say, Fury Hunter was in the first match of round 1.
Yep, that's right. So Pavel's going to go ahead and try once more to go for this Demon Hunter deck. I like Demon Hunter a lot against Druid, just because Druid can spend all the time ramping that they want, but by the time they get set up, you might have too much pressure on them for them to feel comfortable enough to go ahead and do the usual spell Druid thing. That being said, though, this Crystal Power and Claw allowing Alan to answer back immediately, and Pavel trying to go for the maximum pressure and tempo board, but perhaps maybe overextended a little bit, so he has to go for a turn 2 weak turn.
Yeah, it did cost him the coin. It did draw the removal out, but again, kind of similar to what you were just talking about. There was Blowtorch in game 1, and now we've just seen that Claw tech. So get some work done for Alan. So maybe just based on what we've seen so far, these reads and what's gone into Alan's deck building, it seems to be paying off so far anyway, at least in this match.
Yeah, and Pavel did have options, right? He could have used Beaming Sidekick on a Battle Mage and then guaranteed that at least one of those minions would stick.
Yep.
He would lose a little bit of power, but at the same time, Pavel does have options by holding on to Satyr Overseer and perhaps developing a Beaming Sidekick with it for later turn. So Pavel chose to take the aggressive route and make Druid have to get half the cards. In this case, Alan does. So you can't really blame him too much necessarily for trying to at least be aggressive against the classic king.
Yep. It did cost him the coin, though. And now Alan did get some ramp off. He is starting to cycle, because the problem is, and Druid hits this a reasonable amount of time in my experience, is if you have the ramp, there are worlds where you ramp and then have nothing to actually ramp into at this point. He does get the Glowfly, so he can generate some minions. And with the help of that Moonfire as well, he can take down that Satyr this turn. So he had options to build some level of a board, but I think edging towards turn 9, he might be actually looking at Glowfly to combine with that Soul of the Forest, just to make the board almost unclearable by the average Demon Unbound.
Yeah, I like it. You know, Alan had obviously the opportunity to go for that Glowfly Storm now, use that Moonfire and that Bog Beam, but now he gets the upside of having those Tree Ants. However, you know, because of his own like greediness, so to speak, which I do believe looks correct here, he's gonna have to deal with even more pressure on the board now.
The second Bug Beam, though, is a huge pickup. You can actually clear off just one extra minion, and that minion being a Shadow Weaver, so representing a reasonable sum of damage. He can just clear that off now.
He can. There's still 5 damage on the board from the minion, so Pavel sees like 0 cards being held. Oh my god.
Game like absolute lightning. I do like what Alan did, though, because the problem he had, he didn't have access to more card draw. So he's either play it slower and rely on card draw off the top, which he does get, or set up this Glowfire board to actually try and secure the board and secure the game. But there's Crystal Power, he can heal. And there's Savage Roar, he can just backswing pretty hard in the next couple of turns.
Yeah, he totally can. He has 10 power on the board, Savage Roar is 12, and Hero Power is 13 extra damage. So he actually doesn't have that lethal from what I count. He'd be 1 off. And Pavel, of course, can also gain life through this I-Beam. So we'll see. There's a lot of really good pickups here from the Volpera Scoundrel as well, with maybe upside of potentially even giving him lethal. If you give some direct damage.
Demons.
Although, I guess a lot of it might be too expensive because you can't Volpera Scoundrel Hero Power and Umbra Wing. You only have a limited amount of mana available to use, so maybe not actually the
Yeah, also, there aren't just that many spells that do high damage. Obviously, Metamorphosis is one that does a ton of damage. But outside of that, you really look at just a Chaos Strike that was offered as well, so there was some level of damage there. But this is so close. I didn't think the game was going to be this close.
Right, Druid is scary. You know, that's part of the reason why a lot of people end up liking the deck, because sometimes they just have like this I win hand, sometimes they have the ridiculous comeback hands. Is that an overflow off the top?
He picked it up so fast, I didn't even see. Oh, if he gets an Ironbark,
crazy.
Although I guess Ironbark's not really the biggest deal here. He wants his Does he even have a second Crystal Power? No, he used it early on, right?
He used his Crystal Powder to move, and then he used the second one to heal.
Yeah.
Which means that Pavel might be locked out here for the next turn. But the question is, can Alan kill him in time? Because he only has Savage Roar. And then here's another thing, too, is that Alan's going to gain armor to go to 6 next turn. And so Pavel still needs to generate a little bit extra damage. Oh, my goodness.
But there's full... Will this madness ever end?
It's starting to get kind of wild. You know, this is kind of ridiculous. Alan still doesn't have enough damage from my count.
There's 20, I think. 21 with Moonfire.
Oh my god.
Is he just going to get the second Savage? Oh, wait, does he run 2 Savage Roar? I didn't actually check.
Power of the Wild, is that enough? 3 plus 6 plus another 4 is 10.
I think that's enough.
Plus another 10 is 20 plus the Hero Power. I think
plus
it might be
Moonfire.
A little bit off. Okay. Either way, it's his best board, and he definitely needs the Hero Power. But yeah, 10 from the Savage Roar. There's 9 on board, so it's 19. Plus Hero Power is 20. Plus
4.
21.
Yeah, plus me. And plus the
plus
Power of the Wild. That's right, yeah.
Wild.
Okay, I was just double checking then, because I was like, yeah, it's lethal. And then Alan took a while, and I'm like, oh, Alan's way better than me. Is it just not lethal? But I think he's just making sure the calculations were correct, and I do not blame him. going to take the win with the help of the Moonfire. And honestly, I really respect the way Alan approached this game in like holding off a bit with that Glowfly to go for like the big turn that was most likely to not just fight back versus Pavel's Demon Hunter, but actually be secure enough to stick that board almost all game and win him the game.
I mean, he also really needed help from the top of his deck. Alan had 0 cards in hand, ends up drawing Overflow off the top of the deck when he needed it the most. And by turn 8 from Pavel's side, when he passed it back, Alan ended up digging 24 cards deep. For reference, Pavel had 17 cards left. So, a plus 11 card difference in terms of how much they'd be able to draw into their deck, which is just huge. You can't really tell. And they ended with like almost the same amount of resources in hand, so to speak, if you count Valkyra's counter generation. So Pavel just, got completely outgassed in terms of resources, and Alan was just able to withstand the pressure. And you got to think, like, if Pavel was able to push a little bit more damage in the early game, would that have changed anything? Instead of like perhaps going for that second Battle Mage, if he stuck something onto the board, was able to just chip a little bit more damage and force Alan to play a little bit more off curve or, a little bit more defensive, would that have changed the outcome?
Yeah, it's really tough, right? Like, the big question I would have, and again, I'm not saying this was wrong or right, but if he'd held the coin, what does a slightly earlier Satyr look like in that game, right? If you can get it off just that little bit earlier with an attack, maybe, make the extra minion, and maybe there's just not a direct answer. And if a Satyr ever sticks, you're looking pretty incredible. But we could talk about that game a little bit later, as we are moving swiftly on to our game number 3. Alan going to be on the top on his Rogue, his final deck to get a win with, whereas Pavel sticking to that Demon Hunter until the job is done.
Yep, another pretty solid opening hand here for Pavel. Game 1 was obviously bad, but game 2 shaped up significantly. And now he's pretty much got what I consider to be the ideal opening hand against Rogue that doesn't have a backstab. Battlefield.
Right.
Very hard for Rogue to deal with this. Especially because, with the Beaming Sidekick out, you're able to even offset this Seal Fate by trading into the Barrel Cast. So in a way, Rogue helped him by, playing a 1-2, and now this Battle Fiend's untargetable.
Yeah, it's tough, right? On the surface, it looks like, oh, well, there's a minion that the Battlefiend has to trade into. It doesn't go face, so that's good. Well, as you mentioned, not really, because Alan could have had a Seal Fate and then settle with a dagger a little bit later on, as you mentioned. But for now, I think we are going to see here this this tech choice, I guess I'm going to call it, but really it's just development of the deck. I've really liked, and something we've been seeing in European Grandmasters towards the end was the secret Rogue, but with just Spy Mistresses in there as just a strong 1-drop. And we see now it's already paying off because Pavel can't interact with it, and it's going to be able to help take down this Battlefiend.
Yeah, and I would say that Beaming Sidekick ends up being a pretty reasonable draw, but I think for Pavel's side, he also really needed to have a meaningful turn 3. So, what does he do besides his Sidekick? He's going to cast Spectral Sight as a 2-mana draw card. You're going to just hero power and hope that he can get Spectral Sight value later in the game, because if he's not going to play Spectral Sight now, either he plays it next turn and still does the same thing, or he's just going to wait for a long time.
Oh, yeah, I like the Spectral Sight because, as you mentioned, it just gets clogged for too long, doesn't it? When do you ever weave it in if not now? And honestly, Pavel getting that Twin Slice is pretty good, not only for now because he can use it to help clear up some of this board, or he can hold it and have it ready for that, ever-present twin or second slice into Glavebound on curve on turn 5.
Yeah. No matter how he chooses to go about this board, it's going to die to the Spy Mistress Grandmummy interaction, which is, honestly for Alan, like, pretty huge and gratuitous, because now he gets the opportunity to actually do a couple things. He could play his Evil Miscreant, which is one of the best cards to get Demon Hunter in the early game because it gives you so many lackeys to help answer the board. And if you find Kobold lackeys, it's massive tempos. And he really can just build the board very confidently by shadow stepping.
Yeah, I like this a lot because also if it's shadow stepped, the Grandmummy gets the reborn effect once again. So it could just be replayed, right? And it's so huge because it's just going to stick around even longer. And that's what you want versus Demon Hunter. You want threats that they're just an annoyance and a pain to deal with. And just Pavel just loves those 5-drops, doesn't he? It's all he draws with his Demon Hunter. It's crazy.
Yeah, this is looking like Pavel's deck is just not being cooperative with what it wants to accomplish, which is early game pressure. And I think if you look at Pavel's deck, there's nothing necessarily wrong with it. This is something that happens to Demon Hunter every now and then. And, you know, as long as Alan's able to keep up the amount of pressure on board and get ahead, Pavel's just going to have to play from behind. And Demon Hunter can certainly win from this position. It's just really hard against Rogue if they're ahead, because this is the position that Rogue wants to be. Having few minions on the board, developing, and just taking apart whatever you can do.
Yeah, if you're against Rogue and you get to the point where they've stabilized health-wise and you start just dropping sort of single clunky things every single turn, they're happy, right? Because they can deal with that, as you mentioned. Whereas now, this has been a bit of a problem here for Pavel. The pickup of the Warglaves is big, though. Because Pavel's still got on full health until now, of course. But this Warglaves means he can do something. He can clear some of this board if he feels he needs to. He can start pushing damage and easily activate these Glaive Bounds if he feels the need to. But I think now he is just setting up for meta hero power, swing, Glaive Bound to try and just end the game.
Yeah, you know, as much as Pavel's like, all right, I guess you can have the board. I'm on the burn plan. And I think that communicates, especially when Alan sees that Pavel's not trying to trade into, you know, conveniently statted lines for Pavel. Like, Pavel's not going to evil miscreant at 3 health. It means that he knows Pavel's communicating, he's giving up any semblance of having board presence. And he's simply going to try to end the game through burn.
I do like it from Pavel, though, because a lot of the time when you're in tough spots, you kind of just have to do what your hand tells you to do. And this just says face to me, you can't battle a board full of 1-drops with a Glaive-bound Adept, right? It's just never going to work. So I do respect this a lot from Pavel. And he's pushing a ton of damage. This is, just because this looked bad for Pavel with his hand earlier on, this is very doable, as we can see now. Alan only on 8 health. Pavel's got 8 damage in his hand. He just needs the time to kick it out.
Oh my goodness. Alan just drawn fire this series. And Pavel will have to probably play Metamorphosis still anyways. He was planning on doing it. But, I mean, it's just like these kinds of resources that make it really difficult for Pavel to get a nice, clean victory. It's going to potentially still come down to the wire here, because Pavel plays Metamorphosis, Alan plays Galakrond. And is that too late by that? Is there too much damage that's being pushed the other way?
Eerily similar to last game, right? Where Pavel meted and then Alan got a thing that negated that swing of Metamorphosis because he used Crystal Power to heal, right? So very, very similar to the last game we saw. But the big deal as well is it all depends what this Galakrond gets. If he gets exactly Kronks, well, he has a huge wide board to buff and then just lethal him with. It's insane. This Galakrond could just unlock the whole game for Alan and unlock this series.
Right, which comes in the question if Pavel should even kill this Shield the Galakrond. Perhaps if he knows this is the most amount of board presence that can be established here by Alan, which is 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13 damage at most with the dagger, because Alan, I don't believe, runs any eviscerates in his deck, then it's possible that the best thing to do is actually to just hero power the base. Alan doesn't have Galakrond, you win. He has Galakrond, you have a chance of potentially still hero powering and getting the win with Glaive.
Yep. Would mean that it's not as straightforward for Alan if that happens, because he does have access to backstabs as well, or Shadow Step number 2, that he could remove a minion from his board in one way or another by himself and then generate some of that board space. But I do agree, I think Pavel should consider just trying to just go face and hope. He is going to trade though.
Yeah. So the problem with not killing that Shield of Galakrond is that there might be too much damage to enable Glaive Bound. He would be at 4 health, and you would have to attack into the shield to enable Glaive Bound at depth. So he's going to play this Galakrond, draw reasonable cards here. Not the best, but I mean, Ambush at the very least kind of messes with Pavel's math a little bit. Actually, this is pretty bad.
Yeah, this is pretty rough.
Stuff. The more I think about it, I'm more like, I guess there's a lot better stuff you can pick up.
The problem as well is he can't even use this praise Galakron and then use the lackey. Say he got Titanic lackey, suddenly things look better, right? But he doesn't have to ban it because that was a Galakron on curve.
Right.
He is still, at least on Alan's side, feeling okay. Because he knows there's 5 coming from the Metamorphosis, but everything else has to be from Pavel's side.
Oh my gosh, though. I mean, he's so close. Oh, I think he needs 1 damage off lethal. Soul Cleave? I-Beam. I-Beam's nice for sure. Actually, I-Beam
Soul Cleave is... Oh, but he can't... okay. Is Soul Cleave better because it heals him for more and removes more minions potentially? Because his hero power... He can still hero power and then hero power again with Glaybound next turn. He doesn't have to press Metamorphosis this turn.
It's true. It's actually a trade-off of a bunch of one number, right? Like, he trades off 1 heal for an extra damage this turn because he gets the hero power as well. True. Of course, if it's ambush, that improves the power on board, so he has to go ahead and heal this.
Right.
There is 9 damage on board, so he actually needs to metamorphose this up again. Unless I'm missing. Oh no, he doesn't have the ability. Dagger. What the heck?
But he does it. We can see though he does have the praise Galakron in hand, which is effectively going to be a dagger for next turn.
There's a lot of ways that Ro can add that 1 damage, but it looks like Alan's going to get a very quick 3-0 over Pavel. Pavel's Demon Hunter getting swept, which is something you're not going to see very much this weekend. But at the same time, that's what people are hoping for, right? People are teching their lineup to try and beat Demon Hunter. Alan was one of them. He actually specifically teched his lineup to try and tilt the Demon Hunter matchups in his favor. And so when you know you're going to ban Warrior and you're expecting such a high representation of Demon Hunter,
right?
I mean, things end up lining up your way, which Alan was able to get off to a very quick 2-0 Swiss record.
Yeah, looking really good for Alan. I believe he has 3-0'd both of his matches now as well, which has got to feel fantastic not dropping a game so far. But I will say, if you are a fan of Pavel, this tournament starts off with 9 rounds of Swiss over 2 days. So Pavel, although had a rough match there, has plenty of time to recover. Of course, he is 1-1 now. But again, congratulations to Alan. I know he has a ton of fans. And again, just going 3-0, 3-0 pretty easily in the first 2 matches, first 2 rounds of Masters Tour Jönköping is huge. But Dan, that was short and sweet, but we are done for now at least. So we'll be right back with some more coverage of round 2 of Masters Tour Jönköping.
Welcome back, everybody, to Masters Tour Jönköping. And with me this time around to sort of help fill in the gap between now and round 3 is Gia. Haven't cast with you for about 2 years. How's it going, Gia?
It has been so long, Lorinda. It's great to have you also here on the casting desk. You've been very useful as a stats man, but I miss hearing you and making fun of how you pronounce the letter R. Let's get into this.
Wow, just don't even get beyond hello, welcome, but you can't speak. Yeah. Let's get on how we mean to continue. But yeah, it's been good fun. And now you actually finally get to shout at me, whereas I've been poking you behind the scenes saying, this is wrong, this is wrong. Now it's your turn. And we're going to get into
right.
Pincher and Tiz.
Yes, Tiz is one of the top front runners for APAC right now. Already 1-1 in the series, but we're jumping into Rogue versus Druid, which traditionally we say this is heavily Druid favored because of that far right card right there. The Glowfly Swarm, amazing opener for Pinch. But for Tiz, he is running that more fashionable questing adventurer build where if you can get that down early and there's no answer, sometimes you can snowball against Rogue, but I would be hesitant to say that's going to be the case in this game.
Although a second one might make it interesting. So it's quite funny because obviously Rogue's weakness is they can't clear a big wide board, and Druid's weakness is they can't deal with a big thing. And both those two things are going to collide in this game of Hearthstone.
Yep, they definitely are. So I guess you could say that whatever comes down first is going to make a huge difference.
Play the big man.
You can only get it up to a 4/4 because obviously the backstab is counterintuitive. You lose that much health.
But
and
of course you've got another. Do you want to just throw it out there and see if they can kill it? Yeah, I like this. As it happens that it is going to die, that's what makes it hard to do, but I quite like this.
Yeah, I definitely like throwing out one and not committing the buffs immediately. This, you can already see, is making Pinch's life a little bit more complicated. Now he has to expend... In most other hand cases, I would say it's expensive to have to expend a coin, but when you have double Innervate and can get the Wrath down, it's not too difficult for Pinch here. It's just a minor annoyance.
Yeah, and that's the first step done, and he does have that Bog Beam for the second step, which is kill the next one. But the next one might not come down quite so quickly. Here it is.
Yeah. Potentially good if he gets a Titanic Lackey. Anything that can boost the health from this a little bit more with the best chance of picking would be very useful. And looks starved for secrets.
But it is out of range. And Glowfly Swarm's going to walk into double backstab, which is going to make this one heck of a foot race to see who can get the damage in first.
Yeah, it's actually pretty incredible here. Pinch, of course, has the option to double Innervate out this Power of the Wild, cash in on the board while it is already there. If he plans on Innervate Overflow next turn, of course, it seems kind of bad, but I don't mind him going for this instead. And then next turn, he can go for Overgrowth and immediately zero-cost Bog Beam. Really like this.
Yeah, just, okay, so you've got a big thing, I don't care. What are you going to do about it? Pincher, one of those players who's kind of in middle of the road for a long time. Sorry, you go.
No, I just wanted to say the secret is a huge rock. Tell me more about Pinch.
Yeah, so he's been middle of the road in Masters Tours, just played 2 or 3 and picked up sort of medium amount of wins, but he did come top 8 in WSG a few years ago, and various good results, including a second in Copa America, and most importantly, I remember him as being a very popular player in the LATAM scene as well, so see how he gets on today.
Yeah.
I think there'll be a lot of people cheering for him.
That is definitely true, especially since last year he lost a LATAM player in race and Nalgidan was on the brink of being relegated. I think that is a particular region that is really proud and supportive of their players, so Pinch potentially a great representative. But questing adventurer is a really big boy. Wow, the trade is making sure that he doesn't just die to a Savage Roar.
Yeah, don't you sometimes just have to go, if I die to a Savage Roar, then I die to a Savage Roar? And because how do you win this game if you go this way? Maybe the Explosive Trap helps a bit in some situations, but really,
I don't know. I think at the very least, if you play around Savage or Lethal, if it's still there, then you give Pinch back board control by destroying Savage or in trade. So I am hesitant to say that I like the play from Tiz. Also worth noting that it was just 5 Glowflies on board, so 1 Roar would not have been. I think he did play around Roar plus Power of the Wild.
yeah. And obviously, I mean, it's easy to say when we can see the hands, but I think when you're playing unfavoured matchups, you just have to pick a card that you can't beat and say, okay, my opponent has that, I can't beat it, and then pretend it's not there and just beat the other cards. But maybe he picked Mount Seller. He can beat it if Mount Seller's not there and Mount Seller isn't there, so maybe this works for him.
Right, I think you hit the nail on the head. That's the situation that he was hoping for. He has managed to stave off this first wave from Pinche, but I feel like it's not very realistic to try to go head-to-head with Druid in terms of just outlasting, because as far as card draw is concerned, Druid has far more ways to get that consistently compared to Rogue, outside of a perfect Galakron.
Yeah, Galakon into Togwaggle and then you might get it done, but you're losing on the value front and on the tempo front here. It's not, you don't want to be losing on both of those 2 fronts in any deck. Oh, no Mount Seller still. Okay.
Mount Seller, but he's hit second Glowfly, which is huge because he has a Savage.
Yeah. So how big can his Edwin be? Not big enough. He has kept out that explosive trap though. So once he's finished clearing up the board, he can go into explosive trap, stunner, Edwin, and see what happens if he does walk into a board of 2/2s.
That's right. He held on to that explosive trap very diligently for the second Glowfly board. Presumably, yes, it doesn't answer Mount Seller, but I think Tiz has spotted like his only way to get through a threat is if the threat is specifically Glowfly, and he did, in fairness, see 1 Power of the Wild already. And it turns out from Pinche's list, there are 2. Sorry, it's Tiz who is running 1.
Okay. That's always weird when you bring a list and it's slightly different to your opponents. And okay, we're playing online, so it's not quite the same as normal. People will have access to the lists during the game, but it's still always weird, and you can make some strange mistakes if you're not careful when you're so used to a certain list.
It's true. Like for me in APAC, I found it unthinkable that people would still be playing Kel'Thas and Druid, but it took a while for us. Largely revolves around who you practice with, in my opinion. But for Pinche, he managed to pick up at least 1 buff card there. But we could see from Tiz a way to set up with the Seal Fate on the 3/5 and just pre-equip the explosive trap.
It also has the option to use the stunner if he feels this is the time. He's only going to get 1 chance at that, but he will want to develop this explosive trap. And the other question is, do you want to develop the Edwin, or do you want to just whistle innocently and see if the 2/2s try and hit you in the face?
It's pretty counterintuitive because at this level, I think you very much expect that your opponent will not be walking into that big of a punish. So if he does play the Edwin, it kind of helps Pinch, quote unquote, if he's trying to play around an explosive trap, because he can create board space by trading into the Edwin and then say redevelop with a Mount Seller. At the same time though, if his doesn't develop anything, how is he winning? Pinche is at full health.
Well, what he's doing I quite like here. He's going for the whistle innocently plan, which is just keep trading away as if these 2/2s are important to you. And obviously you're going to get traded back into, but it does kind of hide the trap a little bit if you're pretending you're scared of them. I mean, you are scared of them because they might get buffed, but you know what I mean? It's at least hiding the trap. He snuck it down now while Pinch isn't looking.
Yeah, you might look at this as counterintuitive timing, but I think Tiz realizes that, hoping that Pinche overcommits into the explosive or just leads into a stalemate is not winning Tiz the game. He's just playing the explosive trap essentially to fill out the mana and, make Pinche's life a little bit more awkward, not telegraphing what the secret is, but ultimately Tiz is still relying on a Galakron top deck, a Togwaggle top deck, and for Pinch to miss a turn of development. And so far, it looks like Pinche might just be missing that indeed. No Mount Seller in hand just yet. Both Glowflies played down. So the Fungal Fortunes, even if Pinche creates some hand space with it, is not very tempting to play. It might discard his Mount Sellers, it might discard his Ysera. So we're going to see Pinche actually play minions for the increased cost.
Yeah, 3 mana Treant, 3 mana Glowfly. You don't want to be playing those, but the second Mount Seller turns up, the game will almost be over.
I completely agree. Tiz needs a miracle. He needs better value. Maybe something from this Draconic Lackey could help him. At this early on enough, I was already thinking if he needed to take a Deathwing in advance, but he'll definitely settle for a big ol' whelp, help cycle towards Galakrond.
Yeah, I managed to get the Edwin down, at least on some kind of protected board. But when I start using words like that, the implication is usually he's going to lose soon. And Pincher might be just tempted to cycle this wild growth here and just...
That's right. I think he has a read on everything except Explosive Trap and Misdirection. Sorry, I mean, he's tested for everything and ruled them out. And so he can freely play these spells, trade off the board, and just hope to stall a little bit more. He has Cycle, it's just slow, it's the overgrowth.
That's a fair point. Yeah, he only loses if Galakrond comes, which is why he's happy to cycle, I think.
What was I thinking of again?
The big problem here is that he, again, doesn't want to play the fungal because now it's looking like half the cards in the deck are things that he could potentially discard. So Pinche taking some time here. Going to take the safe route, realizing that it's only very particular cards from Tiz that could punish him for not developing immediately this turn. He knows that the card in hand is a generated Lackey and a generated Dragon, so he's only really scared of an immediate Togwaggle play or an immediate Galakrond into bigger threats like the second quest. Sorry, we've seen both questing.
Yeah, that was also an attempt to get rid of the secret. So, and it did get rid of the secret. Just a little bit slow vanishing.
Oh, the Tog is huge. So if Pinche whiffs again on Ysera or Mount Seller, very unlikely, but if he does, maybe Tiz gets a window to come back. I'm even thinking Crown over Wand here, potentially.
Wow, yeah, you might be right, actually. Because there's... Although with Galakrond still to come, Wand's still fairly decent.
Yes, Galakrond is the big one, very good point, but my thinking is that he's played both both Questing and the Edwin. So in terms of an immediate way to race Pinche, I think that taking legendaries, maybe 6/6 stats on average, I don't know the average, that's your job, Lauren.
Yeah.
Seems like it'd
I never did get round to that. Take Kobold and see what you get.
Right. Okay, there's the Ysera. He has Ironborg. He's seen a Blackjack Stunner. So there's Pinche, safe and ready to redevelop next turn.
Yeah, and redevelop is an understatement. It's just going to be absolutely monstrous, assuming that he hits any sort of decent randomness, because he's got the overgrowth, the backup, he's got the fortunes. He's going to draw a whole lot of his deck. And it's full of dragons.
Very true.
So this is Tiz's chance. Let's see what he does choose.
Okay, still going for the wand here. While he has used a lot of his threats, of course, Kronk's Galakrond are still in there. That's a big one. And the flick to immediately clear Ysera is also huge. Oh, interesting. Witchy Lackey. I was thinking that instead of Praise Galakrond there, maybe he could trade off a minion to make space and then evolve the flick immediately, just for more immediate threats next turn that can already attack. But he is still threatening lethal damage on board. Pinche needs a miracle.
That's insane how this has gone.
Yeah.
Absolutely nutty. And you're saying he's a miracle. He's going to have a lot of chances at that miracle. Although, obviously, the Rogue is still in the best position.
Yeah, as far as dragons are concerned, there's not really that many that immediately impact the board, and only a couple taunts, Emerald Explorer and the Evasive Draconid, come to mind. And so I don't actually see a way that Pinche can stop this damage.
No, and the problem is he's going to fill his own board up here, so...
Yeah, can't even try and beg for a couple Griffins. Only has, if he plays Mount Seller now, it's only one proc. That's GG. Digging for the other iron bark, I suppose? Is that the... nope. Where did your cards go? Never mind.
Yeah. He's lost all of his cards.
Okay, there's a taunt.
Skeletal Dragon doesn't look enough, but maybe it is.
From, to use a Britishism, where Pinche is at, maybe it is if it heals him for 10, but of course, here's this Flick Shadow Step available for Tiz.
And that will be 2-1 to Tiz.
That was insane. Rogue seemed like it had dead turn after dead turn in the mid game, but the fact that Druid took so long to get down a Ysera or a Mount Seller made all the difference.
Yeah, and he didn't panic. That's what you've got to do to get those extra few percent. It's like, if you're Tiz, you've just got to hope. And he chose to play around, I win if my opponent has no Mount Seller, and that was the situation. He had to choose between that or second Glowfly. He chose the Mount Seller route, guessed correctly, and it worked out for him.
Yeah, it was a very fascinating situation actually in the mid game where we were saying maybe he could just stall out by playing Explosive Trap, and that line plays around quote unquote just losing if they're it can give him more time if there's no second Power of the Wild, but even if it gives him more time, it doesn't give Tiz an actual win condition because he wasn't able to attack face. He wouldn't be able to stick minions, so going for a half and half approach actually gave Tiz that window. And now we're moving on to an unfavorable for for Tiz, and however, the Demon Hunter opener is lacking that early pressure that it really relies on to get there against Druid. Tiz already with the Mount Seller and 2 ramp spells and a big draw there for next turn. He can go coin for the Overgrowth and just turbo out this Mount Seller. Looking great for Tiz.
Yeah, getting the Mount Seller down against Demon Hunters, just almost GG on the spot. The Demon Hunter has so little ways of doing it. The one saving grace, if somehow you get Altruist down and Skull, but that's a lot of mana just to set it up, and you're going to be so far behind on mana. It does look bad for Pinche at this point.
Does indeed. Granted, Tiz can't quite play Mount Seller for payoff next turn. He would have to innervate it out, and he doesn't have Moonfire or another innervate. And so I think we're more likely to see Tiz deviate, just draw some more with the Fungal Fortunes, remove as much as he can, and then go for the Mount Seller on the 7 mana turn, where the Iron Bar costs 0, and then he can pair the innervate with Crystal Power.
Yeah, Pinche is just not able to generate enough at the moment. And Tiz trying to follow up a top 8 at Arlington, by the way, so this hand's going to put him in a good spot to do a 2-0 start here. And the number of players are starting to thin out. There'll only be 100 and something players left on 2-0 after this round.
Right, we are witnessing the calm before the storm here for Tiz, and so Pinche has a window to try and redevelop, push the damage to face over the next turn. It's crucial that if his Cane gets to stick, then the Iron Bark is useless for Tiz here. But we can already see there's not just Bulk Beam, but double Moonfire to get through the Cane.
Yeah, and then it's just a case of you've got so many ways of this going right for you with a Mount Seller. Like, there's so many chances getting taunt, so many chances getting rush. And like you say, just double Iron Bark is going to be almost impossible.
Oh my goodness. Taunt for days. I was going to say maybe if it's just the double Iron Bark and no additional taunts, the Warglaives can soften up the majority of it. But between this much health, all the taunts for Tiz here. It's looking real bad for Pinche. Of course, throwing out the emote.
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, I've got the Metamorphosis, but that's not really enough against this whole army of taunt, man. Wow.
So he can swing into the 2 Silverbacks, into the Cobra, and into the Grizzly, but even then, the most he can push face is 10, including the other charge of the Warglaive. Sorry, not even 10, because 2 attacks would have to go into the Cobra.
Yeah. That's if nothing happens here.
And he can't even kill the Mount Seller. That's the huge one.
Yeah, you would think that 15 would at least be some sort of problem when you've got Metamorphosis in your hand. I mean, maybe it is.
I mean, that's what he's hoping for.
2 shots.
Yet an option to kill Mount Seller, but it involved trading his entire board and his face. So Pinche is just hoping that he can survive for 2 hits of Metamorphosis, but not really, because that means 6 mana of his next turn is spoken for, and that means he can't spend that time preventing any damage from the other side. Oh, of course, a Griffin for your trouble.
Now that really is going to be very difficult.
Imagine not bringing Druid. Crystal Power to rub it in as well.
Bad Gia.
I've been casting APAC 8 weeks. You know where Derek and I stand on this deck.
And I believe Glory's doing quite well. He was winning this round at least. I don't know how he did in the previous round. Keeping an eye on your APAC team.
You seem to keep an eye on everyone, Lauren. I don't know how you do it. You must have a million sheets, but I just want to say thank you for your work.
I appreciate it, but yeah, when your brain is as old and terrible at holding information as mine, you just keep looking at things over and over again until it's kind of a necessity rather than some sort of amazement thing. Oh my goodness, dragons just keep appearing. I think this might be game, Gia. What do you reckon?
It's close, Lauren. It's really close. I feel like it is just a little bit above lethal.
It is continuing very good Masters Tour performances, and somebody I don't think we knew much about going into the start of last year, but slowly but surely sort of permeating into the consciousness, and is just making sure every single time he's up thereabouts.
Yeah. For Tiz in particular, as you said, like, he is one of the front runners in APAC, one of the top prize earners based on MT Arlington and MT LA Online. And should he have another good performance, he'd be a likely candidate to make it to Asia Pacific Grandmasters, possibly alongside Alan Numbers. And that would be pretty huge for Taiwan as well, because we were seeing that in previous years, they had some of the best performing players, but recently it seems like Japan and Korea have been taking that away from that particular region. But speaking of other APAC Grandmasters, Frosty, who unfortunately had a relegation recently, pretty poor performance in Division B, has also a chance to put himself back up there.
But he's going to be up against VK Diana, and VK Lions team are a new team, but they've been doing pretty well over in the China Team League, the Gold Team League. They're not going like amazing or anything, but they're at 50% the last I saw, maybe a touch above that. And XHX also, I don't know if XHX is in this event, but another member of this young team that are not only young as a team, but the members are individually young. And Lion is just leading them really, really well to all get so much better at this game.
Yeah, you mentioned Lion has been leading them, but it is very interesting that they're not actually applying the same ban strategy. From Lion, we saw her leave up Warrior a while ago, and for VK Diana, he has banned it away and is instead leaving up Demon Hunter, which is probably the more orthodox strategy. Interesting to see that despite them being on the same team, they don't have the same philosophies as to what they would ban. I remember VK Diana from a particular tournament I watched but couldn't really understand from the Chinese scene, where it was actually him versus Lion in the finals. And that was one of the tournaments that cemented Lion's amazing streak of tournament wins in her local scene, which then led to her qualifying for the global finals. And now she is where she is today, and that definitely means that VK Diana had some part in helping her prepare as well. So for Frosty, could point out the evil miscreant.
In those videos, like, she tore through the whole VK team in just getting there. Like, everything just seemed to be a VK mirror in the bits that we got to see, at least.
I was trying to think of whether there's a team over in the Grandmaster scene that could compare, but I don't think we've seen quite that level of dominance in a region from a singular team, unless you count France as a team.
Yeah, we can almost count Liquid in a weird way, because that's Bunny Hopper, Frozen, and my poor little brain, Purple, is pretty strong, but I think VK may well be more dominant than that now.
Well, speaking of dominant, VK Diana's hand is looking very, very powerful. Had the fungal opener, has the ramp leading into exotic Mount Seller. Very difficult for Rogue to answer, and for Frosty in particular, he has not hit a particularly high pressure start. Can't quite beat the Druid before it gets going, which is the MO for Demon Hunter in this matchup.
Yeah, we saw the weird way earlier of how it happened with the Rogue, but this time looks like the more normal way that Rogue actually gets into it, if it does.
We saw VK there hold onto both of the Bog Beam, not afraid to take an additional 3 damage to get that guaranteed payoff of an additional beast. Against Rogue, I can completely agree with that because there's far less burst available to them now, and board control is the name of the game.
And that board is well and truly controlled, and now it's just a case of, will it stay that way after this crazy looking turn? Mount Seller turns always look crazy to me.
Again, imagine not bringing Druid. This is just my agenda, Lorinda. You have to live with it.
Okay, I'm just going to let you get on with this for the rest of the day now. You've probably seen me memeing quite hard about Druid on social media.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I think the deck has got better. I think people have tuned it up very well. Original versions did seem pretty weak, and it does seem better, but it's still, I don't know, it's not my sort of deck.
Okay, that I can agree with. It is definitely not a lot of people's cup of tea. But for VK Diana there, we saw him taunt up a relatively smaller minion, try to spread out his threats because of the possibility of secret Blackjack Stunner on Frosty's side, which you don't generally want to give Rogue just one big fat target that they can remove conveniently. Frosty has drawn his Questing Adventurer now, but as far as I can see it, there's no way to remove the Mount Seller.
Yeah, and the problem is from where he's sat, he's just dead next to it. As it happens, he's not. So any sort of ambush trickery is just way, way too slow. But you're going to need some sort of trickery or you don't get into this. And yeah, I like the Seal Fate. You're recognising that he's absolutely doomed and trying to find something that just gets him out of it.
Name of the game for Frosty is try to survive until Galakron, and then probably hope that the Galakron draws him Kronks. But the thing is, VK Diana's deck, if you leave up a Mount Seller, all of it is good. There is no whiff, because everything is either a minion or a spell. A minion has a huge impact, like another Mount Seller or Ysera, or the spell just generates him more threats.
Yeah, and it's just the last thing you want to see is more threats. And Diana's making the decision here as to whether to play the other Mount Seller or not, but worst case, it's an ambush and you kill it with your Mukla, so who cares? Or your Griffin that you are bound to get.
Now you're thinking like a true...
I've heard enough Geodarek casts to know that Griffin always turns up.
Well, that's the mini Griffin. Not a huge deal for VK Diana that... Oh, is he not trading the Mukla?
Maybe it's a board space issue. Maybe he wants to make sure that he can always play his Ysera if it turns up.
Okay, that reasoning from point A to point B makes sense, but I'm not sure why board space would be an issue. If you have a full board against Rogue, pretty sure you're winning.
Yeah, I can't really make it work, but it seemed to be so weird that it was deliberate. Because if you're on autopilot because you think you've won the game, you don't make that trade in that way. So that was a choice that was made for some reason.
Well, the card draw has not stopped for VK Diana there. Yeah. Just realized the reasoning is flick Skyshift to kind of play around both of the Mount Sellers dying in one fell swoop. Still, though, I think that it's pretty fine in any regard here because, of course, EK Diana did just rip the Savage Roar.
Yep, good work, team. We got there. Well, you got there. I was just busy staring at the screen. And it goes to 1 apiece. Frosty. I don't know who I want to win this. I love Frosty. I'd love to see Frosty back in GM, but also I want to see VK tear up this tournament to some degree because they are doing so well and we see so little of them.
It's true. And the lineup from VK Diana is a little bit different from Lions. No Highlander Hunter there. Instead, he has the Quest Warlock, which might also play into his decision to be banning Warrior instead of Demon Hunter. So I think if you're seeing this type of lineup deviation between teammates, it really stands to show that the meta is largely bring 2+2 of your preference. Even within a team, you can't get people agreeing on the 3rd and 4th decks, any of them being just straight up objectively better than the rest.
And it's probably slightly weird for the Chinese players because their team league is last hero standing. And it's 9 weeks long. I think they're into week number 6 now, as that really is a dirty trick, putting your card there. So they've been playing 6 weeks of last hero standing, give or take. And although you still play the games the same way, blah, 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 it takes a moment for your brain to reverse when you change formats like that. And to be clear, sorry, their team league is the way into the World Championships for the Chinese players. Even though it's a team league, the individual results count.
Yeah, it's a very different circuit that you mentioned. And as you said, thinking for LHS is reversed. Instead of trying to just bring quote-unquote the best decks, you're trying to make sure that your decks cover each other's weaknesses, that you're not too all in on aggro control, for example. VK Diana here, though, pretty decent opener with the questing, could also keep cycling with the Sense Demons, but now Frosty has gotten down the Secret Train, and that's going to start to be a bit annoying.
Yeah, it's always a bit weird. Like, when you first face this, you think it's completely busted that your opponent plays 2 or 3 secrets a turn. And the more you play against it, the more you realise that most secrets are actually garbage and kind of do the same thing as each other, and you can trigger multiple secrets in one go. And then you realise, actually, sure, that was really clever of me, but I've just missed 3 turns dealing with a bunch of nonsense that I didn't need to deal with. So I'm still not sure at the end of all that how many secrets you need to be generating as opposed to actually putting things down to try and kill your opponent with.
I definitely agree that it's more about putting on the pressure later on as Rogue, but that's largely unavailable in the early game, especially with Frosty's particular list only has the 1 questing adventurer and still the full secret package of double ambush, double dirty tricks. So I think it's more so that it just gives Frosty something to do, and potentially you hit an upside on some of the secrets. If you can generate yourself another dirty tricks, then it helps you cycle towards the invokes. And now that's why we see Frosty just getting down that Devoted Maniac last turn. Not trying to milk out more secrets, but rather get the invokes, because he already has Kronks in hand.
Yeah, and it's interesting. He already looks a lot more solid just in the bits we've seen here than he looked in a lot of GM. We noticed it towards the end of Hunter Aces match as well. It's like the players, once they're actually not GMs anymore, they relax and play so much better. Because they didn't get to GM by being bad at Hearthstone. So now they're just playing on their nice, happy instincts. I don't know, they just seem to play a lot better in this situation.
For Frosty in particular, though, I think he is aggressively making it known on social media that he will not be referred to as a Grandmaster anymore, because in most stats, he's still lumped in with the GMs. And it's true, he's a GM for this particular season. I do think, though, that he has a newfound or rekindled flame in him for playing in the lands, because there is so much more at stake for people that are getting promoted into GM versus people that are already there.
Yep, it's a matter of taste. I think some people find the pressure of GM just a little much, like being scheduled week after week to turn up and do the game time after time against the best players in the world. And you've got to be mentally tough as well as good at the game to manage to do well in that environment. Plus, Frosty's just got an amazing sense of humour. He was quite happy to get memed about it all the way through, even though nobody really wants to be nasty to people who are relegated. It's a big deal, of course.
All right, Diana gets his first plot twist down, gets the Mortal Coil, can clean up the Hanar, and also gets the news that it was pressure plate, and this others is ambush because it didn't proc the dirty tricks. So now a fully clean board, Frosty with the initiative. Fully expect him to start seeing him get down even more invoke cards, the Shield of Galakrond, and Titanic Lackey probably because Pharaoh Cat would run him into hand space issues.
Although wants to make sure he keeps a Lackey back for next turn, so it will depend what he gets from this. Obviously,
true.
Togwaggle being the card.
Yeah, I was gonna say Faceless is the one Lackey you might play over Titanic here. Witchy, arguable as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Witchy's a really weird Lackey. When it's good, but it's normally just the spoiler, the one you just don't want.
Okay, Diana running Blood Mage Thalnos, not an orthodox card that you see in the Quest Warlock list, but it kind of makes sense. It's like a mini Moarg that also helps you cycle.
Yeah, it's something I've enjoyed greatly about the lands that have been cast online, is we get to see more of the Chinese players and the little techs that they've got that we haven't used, because the Chinese community don't interact that much with the Western community. So some techs just grow up and we just don't get to see them.
Yeah, it's funny how geographical differences can just make... It's like the concept of evolution and species diverging because they're adapting to different factors. And in Hearthstone, it means different techs become popular because maybe people are more predisposed to bringing a certain deck or a certain playstyle. But in any case, huge draw for VK Diana allows him to clear the board, and the quest is online now. Frosty needs to get a lot of pressure from this wand, and also needs to clear up some hand space.
Yeah, always the issue with the wand when things are going quite well is your hand is full, because Rogue doesn't really curve. I know it can, but because Rogue's cast to sort of all mid-range, just making that space can be a nuisance at times. And they have to be mid-range cards, otherwise your wand would be useless. You don't want to reduce your naught cost cards to naught. That's kind of a waste.
This is a huge nuisance because the only cards that are cheap enough to dump and don't generate anything are the Secret and Blackjack Stunner, which you don't necessarily want to bounce a Keladon because it could be removing your Edwin later on, it could be removing your questing even if it's more expensive. And Frosty also wouldn't be overdrawing VK Diana here.
Don't let the door hit you.
He is just gonna bite the bullet though, realizes that it's more important to get the one pressure rolling immediately, and he can just keep in mind later not to go all in on one huge minion knowing that there's a Keladon in hand. Ooh.
So now it's even more important to get these invokes played and just get on with things and get this hand dumped. Just play cards. No, not that one. That puts something back in your hand. Something else. Anything. All of his cards make cards.
Okay.
Ouch.
Man, I do think case of rope pressure getting to Frosty there, making sure not to overdraw. I think it's pretty clearly better to go for Draconic Lackey and to backstab your Lackey there. And if you're going to Shadow Step the Blackjack Stunner, you would probably leave it in hand instead of replaying. It's very useful in the matchup.
You want to make space and you skim across, you go, yeah, I'll play, oh no, that makes a card, that makes two cards, this makes a card. And you suddenly realise you just find something that works because your aim in your head isn't really well planned out. The only aim is dump a card somehow. Very true. Rope pressure is real. Do you see though, the flick costs 0 for Frosty, so that's a very easy answer to get rid of the 9/9 taunt. Can play down some of these 1-drops, make space for Galakrond, rather just the Spy Mistress and the backstab. Works for me. There's not many flick targets in this deck either, so I think we just see that straight away, right?
Yep. The one thing Frosty has to be of, I suppose, is not overcommitting into Twisting Nether.
Yep.
Oh, Dragon Queen is interesting. He'll be drawing far through his deck after the Galakrond comes down.
But Frosty's a memer. Oh no, Frosty, you've let us all down. I want to see Nozdormu into plot twist.
Oh no!
And lose the game because of it.
Frosty holding back on the Galakrond, I think, trying to go for a big swing where he can get down the weapon, zero cost minions, and Alexstrasza all at the same time. And the board he's put together for this turn is no slouch either.
But talking of a big swing, Diana can kill most of this by traditional methods. Let Frosty reload and then go for the twisting nether and dump a load of good things on the board play.
Traditional meaning the 2/1 cost spells and the Crazed Netherwing, right? But of course, he was aware of the possibility of counterspell, dumps the Mortal Coil first, and so he'll be leaving a 4/1 at the end of this. Not the end of the world, but largely annoying. Even though the counterspell just removed a 1-cost spell, I think it was a great timing from Frosty.
But this also might give Frosty the message that Diana can't kill everything, and it might make him overextend. And if he does that, he is going to have an awful surprise coming back the other way.
It's getting to a point where Frosty can have his cake and eat it, though, where, yes, you can overextend, but in the meantime, you're developing the 5-2 claw. If Alexstrasza comes down, he puts VK Diana down to 10, and he doesn't know that Twisting Nether is the 0 cost, so he could just be saying, okay, I'm going to make you play your Nether, that's pretty much your whole turn, and then I just follow up with Crocs for lethal. Big question is, though, whether he commits the Edwin.
I think you do, because he almost has lethal anyway with the 2 face swings plus the 4 from the shield of Galakrond. That's 14.
Sure.
So I know there's only one lackey that does it, but basically any card will do it. You overcommit and you expect your opponent to play 8 for their Nether. But this might go wrong because the Nether is the 1/0 cost card in Diana's hand.
Mm-hmm. So that is a pretty fortunate outcome for Diana that he got the 0 cost Nether, but he's not hit Nether Breath to be paired with this Moarg. We could see him go for Zephyrus for healing, but it's a huge blow to tempo to skip out on Dragon Queen on this turn. Okay, he's just saying, you don't have 1 damage?
You fell right into my trap.
That is crazy brave to me. And now he has to Soulfire this 2/3.
Yeah, I was just expecting Zephyrus into things.
Me too. Maybe develop something else and then go Zephyrus Healing Touch. Maybe the mana didn't work out quite too perfectly, but Healing Touch and Holy Light were available there. In any case, Frosty is able to get the win despite a taunt. He could sap it or just double play the Kronks. Easy game for the Rogue, which is not something I expect to see in this matchup.
No, and tidily done by Frosty. And I don't think Diana did that much wrong, although Warlock is definitely not my speciality. All the other decks I've played a lot of, the Warlock not quite so much. Well, I did listen into a lot of your playtesting during Grandmasters, so I've learned everything I know from you.
But it turns out I feel like we got a lot of things wrong as the more I watched GM, the more I see people dumping the cards and tossing cards that we were holding on to, the more I see strong and experienced players playing Alexstrasza in the mirror for tempo. So I think that the deck still has a lot to be solved behind it, but I would agree that I didn't see anything too strange from Diana there. But well played to Frosty, timing the threats really well and getting down a very impactful Galakrond. Now, though, he'll be the one on Quest Warlock.
Yep, and Diana going for the non-mirror first, which I am thankful for. Because the Warlock mirror is really weird. It just seems to be whoever lands a big Abyssal first tends to get it done. I know there's a lot of intricacy, by the way. I didn't want to oversimplify that.
Pretty slow start for VK Diana after this turn. The can 5 drops. I feel like we were seeing this just a few series ago. For Frosty, though, he has the Questing Explorer to help him cycle through the deck and is already sitting on the double Nether Rust. Problem is, he would much rather have Dark Skies in place of one of those or a Dragon, because the 2 Breaths without the Activator or a Moarg are very inefficient removal.
Yeah, it depends what you think your opponent's going to do. What can you read from the last turn? And I'm a bit scared when Demon Hunter just plays one drop on turn 2. That's always bothers me. It makes me feel they've got a good hand of 3s.
Of course it's the right way.
So
Well,
I
for
would
Frosty, he would just have to consider what is the maximum amount of health that VK Diana could put on the board on turn 3. So the outlier case is if there's second beaming sidekick and another 1 drop, that's like a total of +6 health. But the average outcome is probably just a 3 drop like Blowtorch Saboteur, which VK Diana is running 2 of. And even in the case of Saboteur, that would be too much health on board for just the Dark Skies to get rid of on the next turn had he tapped. So he went for the Explorer to try and soften things up. And now we can get the Dark Skies clear.
And I recognize that from episodes that you have created for YouTube content, so we should check that out, of course.
Thanks, Dorinda.
I wonder if...
I said Dark Skies immediately, but there was some merit to maybe holding on if you think that the board gets even wider on the next turn. But again, there are health breakpoints that punish you for that, and I feel that the Nether Breasts are more valuable in hand when he eventually draws a dragon.
Eventually. There are not many dragons in the deck, but of course there's lots of card draw because you have life tap and you have plot twist and you have all sorts of things going on.
Right.
And there's a dragon anyway, just to make me look even more ridiculous. Thanks, game.
Still, we see Frosty hold on to it because A, he's not getting the full healing if he uses it on a 2-2. B, it's a 2-2. There are far more threatening things. He want another breath like the Glavebound. And C, he wants to have more cards in hand for when he coins out Abyssal Summoner next turn. For Diana, it's so awkward, right? He just needed one Innervate in this deck to make things completely smooth out.
It's just about mentally ordering this now, because even though this is a nightmare, you can at least get things going with the Warglaves. But it's the turns after that you really want to just do more. When do you want to get the Metamorphosis in there? And a long time from now would be my likely answer there.
Can definitely agree with that. For Frosty, having seen a Warglaves, it does seem a little bit scarier now just to play a taunt, because you're saying that the taunt gets eaten up. But the upside of that is that if Diana swings twice into it, he's taking a lot of damage. However, Frosty wouldn't really have a convenient answer to deal with threats alongside killing off the taunt. So we see him deviate and try to play the Netherwing first.
Yep. And that worked out not too terribly for Diana, but yeah, just once again to prove me a liar, the Moag turns up and suddenly everything for Diana is actually just terrible.
We're gonna be rich!
Don't do that to me, but you're correct. Reno happens and the game starts again, except Frosty's developed his hand nicely and Diana's used up a load of cards.
Yes, that puts it very simply. Diana is far on the back foot here, but he does have a very high value hand. All of the most impactful cards drawn for him, at least as singular cards. We're still probably looking at a Skull into Altruist type game plan for Diana to make up the rest of this damage. And that's if he's able to find an answer for the 6/6 to begin with.
Yeah,
he could shoot it, hero power it, and then Glavebound?
I think you have to take 2 hits to the face on it, because I don't think you get there without the damage from the hero power. I might be wrong, but I don't see where enough damage is coming from doing it this way.
I see your point, but I also get that Diana's very scared of taking that 12 because that would put him down to a 13 breakpoint, which is, you know, Malagos with 2 procs, or you could say 3 of the damage. I guess it's still a lot to ask for, having seen double Nether Breath. So I'm actually coming around to your way of thinking.
Yeah, my argument would be if you've got 2 procs for the Malagos, you can kill these 2 minions, and then what's going on? It's kind of what we're going to see, in fact, give or take. It's not over yet, though. Skull is one heck of a Hearthstone card sometimes.
Definitely agree with that, but Frosty has just a skull hero power basically in terms of mana cheat very soon.
Yeah, and plenty of health to back it up. That health total, of course, does go down really quickly when you're playing against Demon Hunter. But even so.
That much is true. However, Frosty did draw back his Sense Demons with a Moarg in hand and one already played, so it's guaranteed to get him the Arenasis. Huge. Just an automatic ice barrier, and then he's able to play the Dark Skies to clear everything up.
But apart from that, everything's going really well for Diana.
Sorry, just one Arenasi, it looks like.
Apart from your opponent healing up, killing all your things, drawing cards. Apart from that, he's having a great day.
Like, the 2020 is a great year, apart from the pandemic and racism and a bunch of other things.
Diana deciding to go all in with his 2 remaining 1-drops. And I guess we should be careful casting here because it looks like it's over, but 14?
Sure. I have been proven wrong in more dire spots, honestly. As long as Frosty plays it safe here, I think he should be fine. He can develop a large taunt here, 7/7 size. He can also Soulfire away this Battle Fiend.
Yeah, it looks like it's hard to have an accident here. But he's making sure he doesn't. It would be great to see Frosty go 2-0. I know I was saying I'd love to see VK do really well. Well, Lion's 2-0, so we'll be seeing more of VK. But Frosty 2-0, PNC 2-0. These relegated players aren't going down without a fight.
Love to see it. As far as round 1, Staz also was winning. I'm not sure about his round 2 score, but there is potential to see some redemption stories here. Frosty gonna have a long and hard think about this though, because taps get him closer to quest completion. Okay, I also like this. Malagos, as long as the Battle Fiend is removed, this also gives Frosty outs for lethal on the next turn.
Yeah, and what's Demon Hunter doing about a 12 health Malagos? If you can do 12, it'll put it into your face. This is important though.
This is huge. He can tank it twice if he wants, but then he won't be pushing a charge face. There's only 2 charges left on the Warglaives, so Diana is not going to respect it. Just hope that Frosty doesn't hit any more healing. Ooh.
Well, that's unfortunate for him then, because that's 8 points of healing.
I bring life.
Enormous. Absolutely enormous.
Ice Barrier and Alex Straja. It's Freeze Mage all over again.
8 points of healing and also just 8 more damage on the board. So now Frosty's threatening 12. He has Soulfire for another 9 from hand, and that draw is not going to help Diana.
Nope, can't see any way that could be. I mean, it is 2-2, but unfortunately Diana is out of the game. Frosty fighting to get back into GM, putting up a great start to the day.
Yes, very much so. You love to see it. I think that Frosty in particular among APAC players, I think his ending score was not representative of his actual time and effort put into Grandmasters. He's been working hard every single weekend, and I'm sure that's true also of the majority of GMs, but from Frosty in particular, you can also see because he's very expressive about it on social media, and it was really tough the way he went out there. It was honestly just so close between him and Flurry, went down to a game 5, and now Frosty, after, getting into GM in the first place after saying he'd potentially be retiring from Hearthstone and then continued on because he knew about GM. We also saw him put out a tweet longer saying that I'm potentially going to be casual now that I'm not a Grandmaster, but what if he gets back into GM?
Yeah, and I'm waiting. It's going to happen to see what happens to the first person who gets back into GM. As we relegate more and more, that becomes more and more likely.
Sure.
I want to see how much more comfortable they are. Like, oh, it doesn't matter. I've been relegated before. Who cares? And when they get that level of comfort, as long as they're still working hard, whoever that ends up being could be fantastic. But we're not going to get any closer to finding out who it is if I don't shut up. So let's go for a quick break and get on to round 3 in just a moment.